We are now getting down to the final episodes in this series. My hope is that this series not only allows you to understand some of the internal struggles within the company as Disney World opened, but also gives you a secondhand vicarious sense of being there as these events played out. In our last episode, we watched as Roy and others began the 3-day opening ceremony with the World Symphony. And today, we will finish off that long weekend, but we still won't be to the end of this series. And I should also point out that I'm recording in a hotel room, as I've been on the road for the past couple of days, so I know the audio quality is a little bit different than when I record at home. But the important things are Disney World in October of 1971 as the grand opening ceremonies continue. So you ready? Here we go. The morning after the World Symphony event, VIPs slowly woke at the Polynesian. Actor Cesar Romero, unable to find a coffee shop, wandered into an employee break room and poured himself a cup, much to the delight of cast members. He talked with them for a while and joked around, then returned to his room to get ready for the day's first event over at the Contemporary. Though the Contemporary still wasn't finished, it was finished enough for its dedication. The previous day, Joe Fowler, walking around its lobby, said, quote, "2 weeks ago, I didn't think we'd be doing this here." By Sunday, the hotel was filled with a television production crew. A team had built a temporary stage on the 4th floor, not far from the monorail station, from which Bob Hope would give his comedic remarks. For the cameras, the stage would place Hope directly in front of the massive Grand Canyon mosaic mural created by Mary Blair. Around noon, celebrities and VIPs traveled from the Polynesian over to the Contemporary for a luncheon buffet called an American Food Festival. With serving tables arranged on the lakeside patio, the entrees were themed to 3 regions of American cuisine. New England featuring shellfish, the Golden West featuring beef and fish, and New Orleans featuring Creole dishes. The desserts represented the cuisine of Florida with key lime pie and, of course, petit fours featuring Florida citrus. Though the food expressed imagination, the cocktails, with bar staff distributing them widely on hand trays, were familiar concoctions found in any big city bar: gin and tonics, Bloody Marys, and screwdrivers. Guests could enjoy their meal outside or on the Grand Canyon concourse. Both offered lovely views. As a precaution to avoid problems with overserved guests, bar service ended at 2 p.m., but the buffet remained open till 2:30. Not long after the event began, Bob Hope boarded the monorail at the Polynesian, where most of the VIPs had rooms, and rode it over to the Contemporary, where a camera crew waited for him. He stepped off, looked at the Grand Canyon concourse complete with its mosaic mural, then launched into his monologue. In a dark blue suit, he looked down at the crowd below him from the makeshift stage. "This is Bob, ex-Mouseketeer Hope," he joked. "How about this? Isn't this a beautiful place?" Gazing up at the massive interior, he added, "Hey, what a building. Now I know where the Goodyear blimp goes during the mating season." Though this didn't appear on the televised version, the Goodyear blimp at the time was just outside of the Contemporary, hovering over the lagoon. Then Hope turned his attention to the Magic Kingdom. "Fantasyland," he said. "That's like me winning an Oscar." But as he moved through his jokes, technicians wearing headphones heard a mechanical hum being picked up through Hope's microphone. Jim Cora, who was down on the floor, radioed up to Tom Nabby, who worked with the monorails. "Hey, can you cut off that blower sound?" "What blower sound?" Nabby replied. "Whatever it is, it's drowning out Bob's speech. Can you fix that?" The sound, Nabby realized, was the air conditioning units on the monorail trains. The quickest way to stop them was to cut power to the entire monorail, which is what he did. The moment he cut power, he could hear Bob Hope's monologue with absolute clarity. At that point, filming stopped, with a production chief explaining that they'd need to reshoot the entire monologue sequence. Hope didn't need to arrive on the monorail again, nor did he need to walk down the stairs. All of that was usable. But his stand-up material needed to be retaped for better audio. This, everyone was informed, would take a minute or two to set up. As Hope stood on the makeshift stage, leaning over the railing, he looked down on the concourse, watching a few latecomers arrive. Over a live mic, he quipped, "Where were you when I needed you during the monologue?" As though additional people might have drowned out the mechanical thrum that caused the retake. Ad-libbing while even more guests entered, he explained, "I had 7 little beavers working on this monologue, and then the monorail rode over it." People laughed. Once the crew was ready, Hope was back on camera, looking up to describe the Contemporary as the place the Goodyear blimp goes during the mating season. "It's really 2 buildings leaning against each other," he said, "and I want to congratulate the architect, Dean Martin." He went on to joke about Disney characters and the modern conveniences of the 2 hotels. Guests had complete control of the atmosphere in their rooms, which was wonderful for guests from Los Angeles. "They can have smog anytime they want it," he said. After the monologue ended, Bob Hope introduced a few celebrity guests and also Edwin Gott, the chairman of the board for U.S. Steel. Then Roy Disney stepped forward to explain that 6 years ago, his brother Walt explained that he would build a hotel with a monorail running through its lobby. It was a hotel envisioned for the city that Walt once wanted to build, called Epcot. "I told him he was nuts," Roy said, "but here we are, and here it is." Once taping ended, Bob Hope felt so good about his performance that he quipped to those around him, "I'm going to walk across the lake for you after this is over." VIP guests returned to their meals and continued to enjoy a cocktail hour hosted by the resort, but gradually guests started to leave, taking the monorail back to the Polynesian or over to the park. Toward the end of the event, Fred McMurray tried to get a photo of his wife, June, with actor Walter Brennan, only to find that he didn't know how to operate his recently purchased camera, a new model that was smaller than a deck of playing cards. It was like something from a spy film. He held it nimbly between his fingers before putting it down, looking out the windows of the hotel and realizing that thousands of fans might be waiting for him elsewhere at the resort. McMurray asked, "What are we supposed to do now?" One of the professional photographers said, "Find yourself some champagne." June McMurray, smiling at her husband, said, "All right." Other celebrities, having only seen the Magic Kingdom during the World Symphony event, headed over to the park, where in the middle of the afternoon they were mobbed by fans. Cesar Romero, courting attention, walked down the middle of Main Street and posed for photos with guests. One of the most visible stars to brave the Magic Kingdom was Rock Hudson. Like many of those invited, Hudson's celebrity gestured toward the past. Though his peak years were behind him, he had been the 4th most significant Hollywood actor in terms of generating overall ticket sales in the 1950s. His celebrity was most powerfully felt by women who had been teenagers in the mid-1950s. Once in the park, one woman followed him down Main Street, quote, "all the way to the Jungle Cruise and back, and he wouldn't even stop to pose for a photo," she said. Another asked for his autograph by the Skyway. "No, thank you," he said, not today." But most of the celebrities were tolerant of the attention, even if it was just to say a quick word to their fans before they returned to the Polynesian for the evening event. On the other side of Seven Seas Lagoon, much to the relief of Disney managers, skies remained clear as a camera crew set up at the Polynesian to capture the luau scheduled to take place that evening. The event began as another cocktail hour around the pool, but at 7 p.m. over the PA system, guests heard the low trumpet call of a conch shell. "Ladies and gentlemen," an announcer began, "the conch shell is calling you to the luau. Just follow the procession. The feast is ready to begin." The meal included fried shrimp, luau pig, lychee duck, and pork fried rice. Once it was over, around 8:30, the conch shell again sounded to indicate that the entertainment was about to begin. As hands slapped against drums, torch runners ran along the beach to herald the appearance of King Leonidas, an animated character from the upcoming Disney film Bedknobs and Broomsticks, an unusual pick for the ceremony largely because the film was not yet released. As the entertainment team had not yet seen the film, they referenced the character simply as King Lion, perhaps unaware of the character's actual name, or perhaps believing that this modified name, King Lion, might be an easier reference point for a group of tired celebrities who had just enjoyed another cocktail hour. King Leonidas came ashore by boat, a lion with a crown and a medallion, and then walked across the sand to his throne where he'd oversee the entertainment. "And look who's in the lion's chair," the announcer added. "A very important person indeed. It's King Lion, and in true Polynesian fashion, we bid King Lion a royal welcome." From there, women in hula skirts related the story of Tahitians traveling to Hawaii over waves through dance. A small troupe representing Hawaii danced with bamboo sticks. Samoans presented a knife dance, and dancers from various islands, including New Zealand, finished the performance with the Polynesian fire dance, twirling torches to make luminous circles in the night. In all, the dance numbers were scheduled to last roughly a half hour, at which time the beach grew dark and the guests' attention was directed to the space above the lagoon, where they could make out the familiar image of the Goodyear blimp, displaying its light board. The blimp in waves was a fabulous piece of misdirection, a gesture arranged so that all guests would look out at the water as the modern tones of a Moog synthesizer filled the area with music, and the first 3 barges of the electrical water pageant, arranged as a sea serpent, shimmered into view. The show would progress with sea lions and octopus, seahorses, and an updated version of the whale that had been used months earlier to test the concept. The evening concluded with the presentation of fireworks again launched just to the left of the Magic Kingdom on a construction pad earmarked for a future hotel. Along with the large caliber aerial shells, the pyro team set 30 fountains along the water's edge to launch silver plumes into the sky. Around the lake, another team operated searchlights whose beams crossed the sky like those of a Hollywood premiere. The show concluded at 9:20 with red, white, and blue aerials to honor America. Again for guests, it was an early night, as there was another set of ceremonies on Monday, the dedication of the Magic Kingdom, which included the best-known events of the grand opening, those most deeply arranged into the popular memory of American culture. Hours before dawn, hundreds of high school musicians in Central Florida left home to attend a rehearsal on Disney property for the parade where they would perform the songs 76 Trombones and When You Wish Upon a Star. While guests moved into the park, the band, assembled from dozens of high schools, was still backstage practicing their numbers. Likewise, hundreds of high school and college singers also came to the resort ready to rehearse. Though members in the marching band used their uniforms with matching hats, the singers were asked to wear their own short-sleeve white shirts and blouses, along with pants or a skirt that was black or nearly black. The masked band, large as it was, also needed special directions to enter the park. To better manage music quality, in addition to celebrity conductor Meredith Wilson, who would direct atop a parade float, Disney stationed 4 local high school band directors down Main Street, each wearing an earpiece to monitor the tempo, ensuring that the band, stretching from the train station to the castle, presented the 2 songs with unity. Unlike most parade units, The band was too large to gather behind Main Street. Instead, they would line up outside of the park and then move through the front gates, continue through both tunnels at the train station to appear somewhat as a surprise, marching up Main Street. For the Monday parade, Disney believed that for the first time, they might need to limit attendance to ensure that the park was not too crowded for the festivities as cameras filmed. But the park hadn't been open long enough for the Disney team to understand the actual visitation patterns. On the one hand, as Monday was a school day, they believed that, as with the previous 3 Mondays, this would depress attendance. On the other hand, celebrity sightings were drawing interested locals to the park. Quote, "We just don't want a lot of people coming over here thinking they're going to see a lot of movie stars," Charlie Ridgway explained. The plan, as it was finalized over the weekend, was to admit no more than 10,000 people into the park before the parade. Inside the park, for the formal ceremony, Roy would stand in for his brother, dedicating the park from a podium in Town Square. Though Walt had been easy before the public, Roy was more reserved. In the days leading up to the ceremony, Roy had practiced his duties preparing to take on this role. Jack Lindquist recalled seeing Roy in Town Square with a small support staff. Quote, "He was rehearsing the opening ceremony," he said. The area around the podium was roped off, but for most of the public, Roy was unrecognizable. He looked very little like Walt. He had never courted public attention, and for these last 5 years since the death of his brother, he'd been happy to focus on the financial health of the company and behind-the-scenes struggles to make the resort a reality. But now, as he practiced before the podium, those within the company understood that he was one of the key individuals, if not the key individual, who allowed this resort to happen. All morning, managers kept an eye on the number of guests entering the park. Attendance remained modest, in part because the sky was dark with clouds and threatened rain. Rather than at noon, the gates were closed shortly before 1:30. The Magic Kingdom wasn't full. In fact, it was far from full, still under 20% of capacity. But managers were concerned that a crowd all gathered on Main Street might spoil the optics for a TV audience. Disney preferred to present the park with a modest crowd. A parking lot supervisor explained to his crew, quote, "We're telling everybody as they come in, they can ride the monorail, but they can't see the parade. It's too crowded. If they come into the parking lot anyway, encourage them to go home." Ticket sellers would still sell tickets, as the gates would reopen after the parade and ceremonies concluded. But for those who purchased tickets, monorail host repeated the earlier message. "Folks," they said, "you can't go to the Magic Kingdom." Still a few took the monorail around the lagoon to see if they could get in. By now, clouds were disappearing, creating near-ideal conditions to film the parade and other events. The music of the carillon announced that the ceremony was about to begin. The bells were followed by the fanfare of heralding trumpets. A row of musicians from the U.S. Army Marching Band lined up across the roof of the train station. During the music, Roy, accompanied by Lillian Disney and Mickey Mouse, stepped to the podium to read the dedication plaque. "May Walt Disney World bring joy and inspiration and new knowledge to all who come to this happy place," he said. "A magic kingdom where the young at heart of all ages can laugh and play and learn together." Among those in the crowd was Dick Nunis. By this point, Nunis and Roy saw a kindred spirit. Like Nunis, Roy had been raised in financially difficult circumstances. Roy had turned aside from the spotlight to focus on the business of running an entertainment company. Roy as well spent a good deal of his life advancing the dreams and desires of Walt. In this, though Roy was certainly quieter and less colorful in his managerial style, Nunes could see pieces of himself in the man at the podium. He watched him carefully with admiration, this man who now led the company. Quote, "When he got up to officially dedicate Walt Disney World," Nunes recalled, "you could see a tear in his eye. He felt very, very good about bringing his brother's dream into reality." When Roy finished reading, an announcer asked guests to rise for the national anthem. As a drum roll rumbled off of a few snares, a color guard with white gloves raised a flag on the town square flagpole, a flag that was a gift from President Nixon. The trumpets from the U.S. Army Band, still atop the train station, began playing, with long, full notes traveling down Main Street. Hands over their hearts, the crowd sang the anthem, but halfway through, they looked around as the musical sound expanded. The fanfare trumpeters were joined by the Walt Disney World Band, creating a sound with greater range and depth. And then, for the final 8 bars, as those gathered sang, "Oh say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave?" From behind Main Street, somewhere on the other side of the train station, a tidal wave of sound was projected toward the park as the 1,000 members of the massed high school band lifted their instruments to their lips to finish the song with the 2 sets of professional musicians already in the park. Once the flag reached the top of the pole, the 500 white birds of peace were released who, as a flock circled town square, then flew to the back of the park. With Roy's dedication concluded, Don Tatum, now president of Walt Disney Productions, approached a second podium arranged on the upper deck of the train station, from which he welcomed guests and announced that the musical festivities and performance would now begin, with a show that encompassed all aspects of the Magic Kingdom, from fantasy to adventure to the promise of tomorrow. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a park announcer proclaimed, "We present more than 5,000 performers in Walt Disney World's grand opening day extravaganza." Before the parade, a group of antique bicycles and early automobiles provided by local car clubs entered Main Street, largely from backstage gates in Town Square, Center Street, and near the hub. Along with them, scores of dancers, dressed as early 20th century suffragettes, stepped out onto the street for a musical number. Park speakers played turn-of-the-century music as the dance units moved into position, then the music transitioned into the song Fortuosity from the Disney film The Happiest Millionaire, set in 1916, which was the last big-budget live-action film produced by Walt. Between the music, the dancers, and the cars, the street was fully transformed back to the boyhood of the Disney brothers, allowing Roy to see, with clarity, just how far he and his brother had come in their lifetime together. The song itself celebrated ways to create small movements of success during periods of hardship. Though the subject of the song was an Irish immigrant recently arrived in America, the overall theme, that of struggling towards success through periods of misfortune, could easily be applied to the experience of Roy Disney after his brother passed away in 1966. The dancers, likely unaware of this connection, moved through the number with the exuberance that often was found in Disney films. Once the song finished, guests along Main Street applauded and waited for the parade to begin. For nearly a half hour, a team of Disney entertainment managers and volunteers had moved floats and marching units into position. Some of the support members were situated behind the fire station gate, while others were out in front of the train station. Bill Baller, who volunteered to work behind the scenes, watched as high school musicians moved into rows outside of the park. Quote, Everybody was a little on edge before the parade started, he said. A manager with a bullhorn yelled out to the band and the rest of the performers. "Everyone fall in," he said. "Keep a good face and remember who is standing next to you." A supervisor on a motorcycle, slowly moving the length of the group, called out, "Stand by, we've started the procedure." Reporters moved in around performers waiting for the parade to start. One asked Sleepy, the dwarf, what he liked best about his job. From inside the oversized head of the animated character came a muffled voice. "Hey," a man protested, "we aren't supposed to talk to the press." "Yeah," added a performer dressed as one of the three little pigs, "we can't talk, we might lose our jobs." Another parade manager, standing at the gate that opened onto Main Street, said, 30 seconds. He looked down the line. "Everyone smile. Remember, there will be 80 million persons watching. Okay, this is the show. Go, go." The parade began with fanfare trumpets marching before the Disney World Band. An enormous bass drum was pulled by 6 ponies, and beating the drum was a cast member dressed as a second Mickey Mouse. Following the drum were more characters, the Pearly Band from Mary Poppins, and then, as when Disneyland opened in 1955, parade units that related to the various themed lands, from the Fife and Drum Corps representing Liberty Square to Tahitian dancers representing Adventureland. It was a familiar Disney tradition, the park celebrating itself. Finally, composer Meredith Willson, arranged on a float dressed as a park gazebo, lifted his baton for the massed band as over 1,000 members entered the park. They came up from the twin tunnels that passed beneath the train station, finally joining into full ranks as they progressed up Main Street. Meredith Willson directed them in playing 76 trombones, a song he composed. Quote, "All those trombones," Jim Corus said, "all that brass coming from underneath that train tunnel. I was standing on top of the train station when this hit. It was like a huge earthquake hit that area. It was unbelievable." Even players in the band noticed a new quality to their music, the sound refracting down the narrow, high corridor of Main Street. Pat Robinson, who played the French horn, said, quote, "It was loud, really loud, yet it was balanced somehow, even with all those instruments." During the parade, Roy Disney, his wife Edna, and Lillian Disney sat on folding chairs arranged on the second story of the train station. When the 1,000-piece band marched by, they stood along with most of the crowd. As the final rows of the marching band moved up through the park, they were followed by 48 Boy Scouts who, in pairs, pulled the 24 netted boxes that Nat Lewis's team had spent the morning filling with helium balloons. They positioned them in a row down Main Street, stretching from Town Square to the hub. At the same time, around the castle, Charles Hurt led the massed choir in singing "When You Wish Upon a Star," beginning with the voices and then adding the sounds of the band instruments until the park was a corridor of sound, swelling in volume and intensity. Singers stood on the castle ramps and the band stretched around the hub. It was a song from the second Disney feature, Pinocchio, which had become an anthem inside the company, an expression of how creativity inside the studio, inside WED, functioned in its best moments. The final note, long and loud, was held as both Charles Hurt and Meredith Willson lifted their hands high, waiting for the visual finale. And then, on signal, the Boy Scouts opened the netted crates, releasing thousands of balloons, which rose on a light wind to stripe the sky, blending eventually with doughy stretches of clouds across an expanse of endless blue. Lillian Disney, aside from walking Roy out to the podium in Town Square, was not part of the official ceremonies. At one point during the day, she said that she didn't even know what was planned and that the entire ceremony had been a lovely surprise. Thinking of Walt, who had been gone now for 5 years, she said, "He loved the world and they gave him their hearts." Then she walked off Main Street with Roy and his wife, moving backstage where cars waited for VIP guests. Roy himself spent time thanking celebrities for attending the event, as star power remained one aspect over which he had the least experience. Once he was finished, Disney handlers led him further backstage where waited a Lincoln Continental. Roy didn't object to being guided inside the car, though he sat there for a moment with the window down. For him, it had been a long day. Actor Andy Devine, who was nearing 70 himself, said, "I'll see you back home." "You bet," answered Roy. For a moment, Roy looked up at the powder blue sky. "I like it in Florida," he said. "I wouldn't mind living down here." Then the town car drove him back to the Contemporary where he had a room, even though he still had a Bay Hill cottage a few miles up the road. Exhausted now, Roy hoped the opening ceremonies had conveyed the type of enthusiasm that came so naturally to Walt. All week, attendance numbers slowly improved, as though somehow, through word of mouth, people started to hear how the wonders of Hollywood were burnished into the attractions at the Magic Kingdom. Also that week, a team of editors blended the previously recorded musical numbers with material from the grand opening ceremonies. There was a section of Julie Andrews performing in a near-empty park with children, a section of Bob Hope stepping off the monorail and delivering one-liners, a section of Jonathan Winters joking in a yet-to-be-opened campground, a section of Glenn Campbell singing beneath a monorail, and a section of the World Symphony performing before the castle, and finally, the 1,000-piece band marching up Main Street. As with earlier productions at Disneyland, this would be the real test, if the TV production enticed millions of families to plan vacations at Disney's new Vacation Kingdom. That Friday, along with millions across the country, Roy Disney, with his family and guests, watched the 90-minute special on NBC. They watched it at his Bay Hill cottage, the same two-room home where he'd stayed each time he'd come to Florida to check up on construction. As the show unfolded across an hour and a half, he could see that the production was uneven. A near-empty theme park, even with Julie Andrews, held qualities that were somewhat spooky and disturbing. Likewise, a deserted campground, aside from a few cast members pretending to be guests, didn't appear entirely inviting either. Yet other segments, such as the marching band, the choir, and the World Symphony, expressed grandeur and wonder. The best sections he could see held the wonder that Walt had mastered so easily. Yet the overall presentation was mixed. He lowered his head and took it in, realizing still that there was a gulf of creativity that separated his life from that of his brother. His son, now grown with his own children, was there beside him. Quote, "He cried, my dad, when he saw it," explained his son, also named Roy. He recognized that the TV show was the one thing that his brother Walt would have done really well. Yet the Disney team still hoped that this TV show would be enough, that it would interest millions in visiting Walt's final project, a project that would likely be Roy's final effort as well. But they wouldn't know the results of the TV show for weeks. Long after Roy returned to California and left daily operations to managers who had learned how to manage a park at Disneyland, a park that was nearly 3,000 miles away from this new wonder in the center of Florida. If you're listening to these episodes as they're released, you know that in real time, we're moving into Thanksgiving week. So there's a lot of good things for everyone to enjoy in the week to come. Next Sunday, I want to put up an exploration of Drawn to Life, the Cirque du Soleil show that explores the history of Disney animation. I've seen the show twice now, on opening night and on its second night. I think there are some key elements that, if you're aware of them going in, will deepen your enjoyment of the show. The show overall is fabulous and is a layered exploration using the grammar of human movement to explore the history of hand-drawn animation at the Disney studio. But more on that next week. And then the following Sunday, we'll finish up our story on the opening of Walt Disney World. If you enjoy these episodes, if they're a meaningful part of your week, please support us by becoming a monthly Bandcamp subscriber. We're an ad-free, listener-supported show. Simply put, without subscribers, we would cease to exist. You can subscribe at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. The best reason to subscribe is to support the work we do here. But on Bandcamp, you'll also find dozens and dozens of extra episodes not available anywhere else, including 2 new Bandcamp exclusives that I put up earlier this month. Until next time, this is Todd James Pierce.